Iowa State. And so Minnesota, of course, is an early season opponent of the Hawkeyes. That game's coming up on September 21st in Minneapolis. And of course, Minnesota is just one of 3 opponents for Iowa that are permanently on the schedule each and every year, with Nebraska and Wisconsin as rivalry games. We got our guy Daniel House checking in from Gophers Guru. So we'll spend a couple minutes on Minnesota football. Daniel, how you doing?
Doing well, fellas. Just loving the college football talk in June. Gets us a little bit closer to the season starting here. It's the time's passing by slow right now.
People will get tired of me saying this, Daniel, but I've said it the last 2 weeks. I'll say it again. Big Ten Media Days is next month. And now, I mean, it's literally a month away. I can't believe this month has flown by. June 20. I mean, we're literally almost month of Big Ten Media Days. So, yeah, it will be here before you know it.
This is the time to take a deep breath after all the recruiting madness, the transfer portal, all the camps going on. Now it's everybody resets, evaluate their rosters, and then fall camp before we know it. Video game coming out. That's exciting. College football, it's going to be in the headlines all the time now.
Is it going to be an exciting season for Minnesota football, though? It's more challenging for everyone in the Big Ten with the 4 entries from the Pac-12. And if I'm not mistaken, Minnesota has about the lowest win total according to Vegas. So following 11-2, 9-4, 9-4 in 3 consecutive full seasons, Minnesota dropped to 5-7 before a bowl victory last year, and change at quarterback, an unknown player there boy, I can't think of his Brosmer from New Hampshire. Can't think of his first name. And so we'll let you take it from there, Daniel, in regards to the hopes that Minnesota can compete.
Yeah, I just think there's moving pieces on both sides of the ball, trying to figure out what it will exactly look like. Max Brosmer, someone that they targeted early in the process, Ethan Kalikmanis transfers to Rutgers, and Minnesota right away zoned in on Brosmer. I would say the big thing for Brosmer early in the year is just adjusting to the speed of the game. You know, how you shape the football is a little bit different into those windows. You got longer, more athletic pass rushers in your vision. All the things that are required to play quarterback in the Big Ten are just slightly different than playing at the FCS level. But you look at the accuracy, the ability to hit the outlet. I noticed that a lot while watching his games. He goes through his progressions and is able to make the right decision. And you see him being able to read the field. From a leadership standpoint, really stepped in here and gravitated everyone toward him. Actually ended up down in Georgia, flying his teammates out there during the break to just get some chemistry going with some of the playmakers on Minnesota's roster. So quarterback is a big component of success. Felt like, last year that was something that they identified that they wanted to, improve a few traits, including accuracy and being able to, take advantage more of the play action game. So I'd say that is the big thing on the offensive side of the ball. And then kind of how wide receiver comes along. I feel like, they added some of the transfer portal, Tyler Williams, who's, we don't really know how far along he is in the development process. Christian Driver, son of Donald Driver, was at Penn State, limited experience, so hasn't played very much, was a corner, moved over to wide receiver. So I'm kind of looking for who's going to be that wide receiver that steps up. You got Daniel Jackson, obviously, leading the way. Lemeki Brockington, who's a very good run-blocking wide receiver, I think is going to take a step forward as a receiver. Elijah Spencer, a transfer from Charlotte last year. Just kind of looking for him to be more productive. He was at Charlotte. Can this season, different role in the offense, different quarterback, can that get him more productive overall in the offense? So those guys right there in the wide receiver room are what I'm watching on the offensive side of the ball.
Mark, I'm curious to get Daniel's take on wide receiver play. That's been such a I mean, I am a guy who has actually brought Minnesota up as an example of a program to me that has, if I'm a fan, and Iowa fans have been there, but if I'm a Minnesota fan and I look back at, the dissolving of the division, I think I'm looking at missed opportunity more than anyone else. Because, I mean, here's a program that has had some of the best skill position players, not only in the conference, I could argue in the country, at wide receiver and at running back. I know the Tanner Morgan career, his legacy, I think is somewhat murky. I don't know how to really sum up how his career ended at Minnesota, but just talk about skill position talent. And I know you talked a little bit about it a second ago, but would you agree with that estimation? And do they have the chance to continue on with that legacy at those positions?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the storyline going into the season, honestly, is who emerges in those skill spots. I mean, tight end, Brevin Spanford's gone, so you're looking at someone like Jamison Gears elevating into a higher role. Darius Taylor, who was hurt last season, one of the best backs in the country at breaking tackles. You look at what he was able to do when you look at all the numbers and go through the film. He's someone who will ascend if he can stay on the field and be healthy. He has that special broken tackle trait that you look for in running backs. They added C.A. Bangura, a productive back from Ohio, in the transfer portal, so they're going to be relying on those two players in the running back room. They added a lot of running backs in the portal. They had a Marcus Major from Oklahoma as well. They got Jordan Newman coming back. And that just kind of is something that Minnesota has valued, the running back position based on how they play the game. The run game is the focal point of everything. And then, you start to really capitalize upon the play action passing game. And wide receiver, I mentioned it earlier. It's like who emerges? They added Corey Crooms last year. They added Elijah Spencer last year. Those guys didn't really get a chance to showcase themselves as well as maybe they would have like to. So now what do you get from Spencer? A year in the program, adjusted in. I think the skill player thing is going to be the key to the season. I mean, they need multiple guys to step up in the tight end room, the wide receiver room, and the running back room, and you got to stay healthy because I think the front end of that depth chart has some potential, but if you start getting into that back end, that's where you could get into trouble.
Our show was go ahead, Corey. I was just going to say our show is a bit packed with a number of topics. So we've got a few more minutes here, Daniel, but can't take the deep dive that we typically do. I wanted to ask about Corey's favorite coach, PJ Fleck. So here's a guy who did a really outstanding job to start off, lifted this program. Now he's taking a step back, and the outlook for this season isn't great. So this is maybe a bit odd to ask this about PJ Fleck because the guy's going 100 miles an hour all the time. But at the same time, is this the type program where he can maybe find if he enjoys it there and likes it there, which I've heard mixed results on whether he really pursued the UCLA job and some other opportunities in recent years, or he didn't. If he likes it there, that he can just go 7-5 every year and maintain a job and make a lot of money and just be the newest version of Glenn Mason or a number of other coaches, or to the South, Kirk Ferentz for 20 years and cash a paycheck.
Here's what I say is the challenge with PJ moving forward. I think landscape has changed a lot since PJ was hired in 2017. You got transfer portal, you got NIL, you got a lot of different layers to how you do this thing. And PJ's philosophical approach always going to be about physical run game, running the football at a high level, controlling the game, controlling the clock, winning up front on both sides of the ball. And I think the thing that's going to be big for him moving forward is how do you construct a roster at Minnesota that can consistently compete? Do you have to change your strategy a little bit more? Do you go maybe a little bit more away from the 4-year recruiting and find productive players in the transfer portal to be able to round out the depth of your roster? I think that's something that a school like Iowa is going to face too. Like, how do you build your roster as the salary cap comes into play here? Is Fleck going to be able to pivot and adjust to this more NFL-like approach to building your roster? That's what I want to see. Is he willing to change his approach and maybe innovate in just a few key areas? Because I think there's really good things, and then there's some things that you can potentially expand upon, which I think is the case with every coach right now. They're trying to figure out what this landscape looks like, including everyone like Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. They're very similar in terms of how they're structured and stuff.
By the way, I just want to, would you agree with my statement earlier, Daniel, that Like, are there a lot of Gopher fans that take that approach? I mean, it's kind of the opposite approach to what Iowa fans have taken in recent time, with a stellar defense and a bunch of guys that get added to the league, but an offense that can't keep them. I mean, they keeps them obviously competitive in every game, and they've won 2 West titles in the last 3 years, but can't even sniff a Big Ten title. Minnesota's kind of different in that, like, defense has been good every year. Offense has been good in areas. Why don't they win more?
It's like all the pieces have to fit together. Last year I thought defensively they lost some depth on that side of the ball right before the season hit, and that thrust younger players into roles that maybe they weren't quite ready for. You look at that linebacker room, for example. Lindenberg got hurt, and then you got Matt Kingsbury and Tyler Stolsky on the field at Purdue late in the season. That hurt the defense and its ability to play with the fundamentals and limiting the explosives and playing the run consistently, like all the things that they did really well. And then offensively, you got a brand new quarterback. You were trying to get him ready to play. He was learning on the fly. He didn't have a lot of reps in the past in game action. So that was a hurdle on that side of the ball. Like it's been bits and pieces where everything came together in 2019 when they were successful, where they had 2,000-yard receivers, 1,000-yard back, and Rodney Smith. They had Shannon Brooks and Moe on that team. They were deep across the board at wide receiver. Bateman, Johnson, Demetrius Douglas at wide receiver, Chris Ottman-Bell. Like, that was a year where the roster was built perfectly from a depth and skill player standpoint. I think every year it hasn't been quite as consistent there as a result of the portal. So that's why I was saying earlier, I think you got to start thinking about how do you build your roster in this landscape. I still think 4-year recruiting is important, but you might have to mine and deep dive and get creative with how you build the depth on your team. And I think that's the case for everybody.
How much did COVID throw things for a loop?
I think that's done a lot of stuff for people. It just guys leaving the program, the portal, and the NIL becoming a thing right at that point. And then they had a lot of momentum with the program at that point, and then slowly it just kind of now it's showing flashes of finding consistency. I think last year you look at a couple of those games, they came down to the last play. Like if you look back at Minnesota's games, that Illinois one where you make a completion at the end of the game, it's a W. You got the Northwestern game where they had a big lead, and in the fourth quarter, didn't make the plays and execute. Like, there's 2 or 3 games you can point back on and go, they would have been at 7 wins. So I think that's the thing. It's just been all about consistency with this program. It just hasn't quite all come together the last couple of seasons here.
Well, just so you know, Mark kind of makes a joke about, I don't have anything against PJ Fleck. I'm not a fan of PJ Fleck, but I tell you, the guy to my left is a fanboy of PJ Fleck. He loves himself some PJ Fleck, Daniel. So you're on the right show.
Mark Rogers, man, he's the PJ Fleck.
Well, this is true. I just Corey does not, he doesn't say anything derogatory about PJ Fleck. Just in comparison, when I go on about PJ Fleck and what a great job he's done in Minnesota, he is not my favorite coach in college football. However, I asked that question a few days ago, actually. Daniel, we would love to talk a little bit more, but we do need to get on to a few other things. We'll leave you with this one, unless Corey has anything else for you. I hate to put you on the spot, but
I don't think we've talked. We have not. I mean, I haven't talked to Daniel since what happened last year. Can we get your take on that? How many months removed from the call that will go down in history that went against Cooper DeJean?
All I'm going to say is that game in September is going to be like walking into a wasp's nest. I've told everybody that all the pent up stuff from both fan bases over the last 6 months, it's going to reach its boiling point. So I'm like, primetime game all day long leading into that one. That is going to be like walking into a wasp's nest.
we couldn't pin him down. Okay.
No, I don't know. I've let that one just kind of fade away.